All right, hello. It is I. This is your video for Practicum this week. We're going to use our Thursday class time as a time for you to meet, and instead I'm going to talk about some of the things I would have been talking about this week on this video for you to watch at your leisure. Because this is a weird semester, we have encouraged projects with low to no budget, because we have feared that there is low to no funding. But it is important to know your way around a budget. While it's true that most groups are not going to be seeking any funding, and most groups aren't going to be, aren't planning on, say, renting a venue or those sorts of things that in other years have been mainstays of the expenses for practicum projects. There are still costs, and it's important that you realize you're taking on those costs. And there may indeed still be income of certain forms that you might not be aware of. So we're going to talk about this, and I'm just going to go through this, make sure we understand. I'll be putting this up on Moodle. This is a Google Sheet, and you can all use this and adjust it to your needs. Let me just begin by saying you should have two versions of this. One version is the proposal type version, right? This is when you're applying for a grant. You will almost certainly do it some point in your life if you haven't already. I'm sure some of you have. If you're applying for a grant, you have to produce a sort of preliminary budget where you are estimating your expenses. Many of them you might know pretty well. Many of them you might not have a good idea, and you're going to have to make a sort of an educated guess, where you weigh not wanting to have too little money against not wanting to ask for too much, for fear that would make your proposal less viable to the people signing the checks. So that's always a tricky question, but I just want to start with that this is going to have two forms that it will take. One is that preliminary proposal budget where you're saying this is what we think things will cost, this is what we think, this is the money we think we can get from these sources. And then as you go through your project, you've got the actual dollars and cents of this is what this actually cost, the money we actually got, and we didn't end up getting this money, and we got more from here and less from here, whatever it may be. And then seeing the difference between those things is important. Okay. As you can see, there's two big sections to this. You got your expenses, things you're spending money on. You got your income, money that's coming in. And then, of course, the net loss gain, that's the difference between the two. Okay, personnel expenses is the first one on this list, and that's a typical line, but doesn't really apply to us. We're not employing people. We're not paying salaries. So that's not something that is important for us. Administrative expenses. This usually includes things like if you own a business and you the rent you pay for your shop, or like insurance, things like that. Things that aren't directly tied to like the product you're making. Those are administrative expenses, and that also sort of doesn't apply to us. As far as we're concerned, and at least, certainly for the sorts of grant applications I've done as a composer mostly, project expenses are the main thing. And that includes venue rental. I'm thinking of my own experience. Venue rental, instrument transportation, renting audio, video equipment, all printing costs, you name it. All those things go under this, and you would line them up. You would write them all down here with the costs on the right. So, if we need 6 horses and we need 12 party hats, that's 2 for each horse. And then we need a cup of coffee. And then we put the cost over here, 6 horses, that probably costs, I don't know, about $8,000. That's too cheap. These are cheap horses. 12 party hats, let's see, that's $150. Cup of coffee, $250. And then as you need more and more lines, you can add them on the spreadsheet. As you need more and more items. And then you can see we have this little sum function up here. Equal sign, sum, and then in parentheses you put the boxes you want sum. So B6 to 11, B6 colon 11. See, that's B6 through 11. And you put that function on that box, and it gives you the sum as you enter it. So now my total expenses are $8,152.50. So that's the expense section. And then income, earned income, not really applicable. Again, we're not getting like a salary as a part of this project. Wouldn't that be nice? Contributed income, that is more what we're looking at. And we have grants or donations. This is broken into grants and donations, and then in-kind donations. So contributed income. So grants and donations would include, if you applied for money, at least one group is looking into that. If you apply for a grant from DePauw or wherever, that would be included here. Any other donations? So let's say, Hubbard Center, I forget what it is. Is it called pre-employment fund or something like that? And let's say they give you $150. And then in-kind donations. These are things that are not cash, it's not money, but are services that are donated, or like equipment, or like coffee cups. So an in-kind donation would be like if you were doing a concert and you had a reception and you got Starbucks to donate coffee, right? You would put, coffee, 2 boxes, whatever, however they measure large amounts of coffee, and then the amount of money that would cost. Again, I'm just choosing totally arbitrary numbers here. And that would get counted into your income, because that's money you didn't have to spend, right? And your expenses would include those coffees, right? So in our expenses, if we knew we were doing a concert and we were having a reception and we needed coffee, we might put, we need to spend on coffee 2 boxes. We think that's going to be about $10.50, and then an in-kind donation, $10.50. So that gets evened out there. So you include dollar amounts for in-kind donations, even though they're not actually giving you money. But it should be reflected in your expenses as well, so it doesn't look like you're just sort of getting money. But you are accounting for the things you need with those in-kind donations. Sometimes it can be tough to say how much a service given as an in-kind donation actually costs. And then, for things like that, you look at kind of like market rate or sort of typical rates of what that thing's cost, and you have to sort of approximate. Okay. And so now we have, expenses added up, spent $8,000, we only have income of $160. And there's going to be a difference there, obviously. Looks like negative $8,000, which is not great. And again, you could just copy, delete all those. You could copy this row and have a sort of expected or projected, whatever you like, versus actual, and keep side by side what you project as your costs initially and what actually happens. But on a proposal like this one, or in a grant application, you would just give them, of course, the projections. Another thing here is, for each of these income line items, you can list whether that is received, whether you've actually got the check in your hand, whether it's pending, you've gotten, say you've applied for money from some agency, you're going to get it, or to be submitted, which is that you're going to say apply for a grant, but haven't yet. All right. For my next trick, I'm going to talk about this grant application. This is NEA, National Endowment of the Arts application that DePaul did a few years ago, 2017-18, or it was for the 17-18 year. Stephen Linville doing this excellent work. And this was to involve Imani Wins, who are of course back this year. And they were, this application was to secure funds to bring them in as a guest artist for that season. So this is a look at an actual real life government National Endowment of the Arts grant. Got some basic information up front. It's a sort of frustrating document to read since everything's in the same font, even the stuff that Stephen was submitting here, so it can be sort of annoying. And of course it's not in the exact format that our proposal is in, but you'll notice a lot of the same things show up. In fact, all of the same things show up, sometimes in different places under slightly different names, but it's all there. And we start with the mission of the DePaul School of Music, and then a budget, which is removed for obvious reasons. Worth noticing, 3 years of budget information. Programmatic activities, this is past programmatic activities. So this is, again, sort of backing up that you're an organization that can do stuff. This is going back to the 13-14 season, talking about the Living Composers Festival. Fair amount of detail here. Guest artists, number of classes, number of participants or audiences. Here's another 13-14 Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra participation. String quartet, Fifth House Ensemble, King Singers. This is all the last, I guess at this point, 3 or 4 years of programmatic activity. A lot of detail in there, really showing the folks reading this that you're the real deal. Obviously, the scope of what we're doing in this class is way different, and but the spirit is the same. One of the things you're going to want to do in your proposal is really project to the people who are going to be reading it, who really don't know you and really don't know the school or the situation. Project that you are in a position to carry this out. We're not asking them for money, but we should sort of approach it as if we are, as if that's the kind of bar. You want to make someone trust you enough that they'd write a check. And now finally on page 7, we get to the project information for this project. So this is the Imani Winds Quintet, Artist in Residence. And I'm going to put this up on Moodle. I'm not going to just read this whole thing to you. I'm going to just point out some things, and you can go in more detail and look at it. Here's the project description. DePaul University will continue the School of Music Art residence in 1718. Again, stressing the sort of continuity of this. Expanding offerings to further engage the community. Speaking to the rationale in part. While connecting more diverse musicians to the residents of Greencastle. More rationale there. The ensemble Imani Wentz has been selected. They and the Harlem String Quartet will collaborate during their final visit to perform this specific concert, Passion for Bach and Coltrane. Okay, so very specific event. The community engagement activities will take place in the School of Music's new space, Music on the Square, as well as local schools and other community venues. School of Music will be the main venue. Shared goal of connecting resident and university communities, enlivening our rural cultural landscape, and elevating the role of music in the daily lives of its citizens. So a few things to highlight here. Who, what, where, when, why, it's all here, right? The when, it's obvious, 2017-18. The who, Imani wins, Harlem String Quartet in part. Who are the partners? Music on the Square, DePaul School of Music. The where is the Music on the Square and the DePaul School of Music. And the who, what is it, who, what, this concert, as well as other activities, which are going to be way elaborated on in a second. And the why is sort of peppered throughout, connecting more diverse musicians to residents of Greencastle, enlivening rural cultural landscape, elevating the role of music in daily lives of its citizens. It's really like the spirit of the whole 21 CM thing. I mean, it's you all have gotten so much 21 CM propaganda over the years that you probably take that for granted, but it's worth saying, like, this is, these are things you do have to say that not everyone would say in something like this. It probably seems like a redundant worldview at this point, this idea of connecting with the community, because we stress it so highly here. But it's not something everyone is doing everywhere. So it's nice to see in this setting that those things are being very plainly stated as the sort of rationale. And then this has a separate section for major project activities, where there's going to be much more detail about what those activities are. So the Imani Wentz residency will include programming for college students, Greencastle Public School students, and the full community. This is a nice formal trick. First of all, it's just very clear. You're listing the three things before you're going to go into detail about them. You sort of give an idea of what that landscape is, and they have a nice sort of it's a sort of a telescoping thing. DePaul, Greencastle Public Schools, full community. It sort of moves outward, and that's just from a writing perspective makes it clearer to the reader. And then there is an actual description of each event. Now, planning for these events is still in progress. This is a useful thing because for some of y'all, there's still some stuff up in the air for your projects. It's okay to say that, right? That's very, very often the case. The following is a listing of possible activities. Imani Wentz will present 6 activities during each of their 2 visits. So notice the balance between being straightforward with what's up in the air, balanced with it. We may not know exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to be 6 of these activities we're about to talk about over 2 visits. So there's a kind of specificity and a range of options. So it's not like we don't know what we're doing and we haven't really even given it much thought. It's we don't know what we're doing, but it's going to be one of these things. And I think that type of language could be applicable to any of the 3 projects right now. There may be things, for instance, for the podcast, there may be questions about what guests they're going to be. And that's fine. That's expected. It's early on. But having a list of several guests, we're going to pick 3 of these people. We've been in contact with these people. But we have plenty of folks lined up. We have plenty of ideas here that are detailed for the video series. Same idea. There was at least some possibility of kind of changing the title of the 3 videos you were planning, or changing the focus of those, right? You can be up in the air about, are we going to do these 3, or are we going to do 2 out of these possible groupings based on say some experts that we may or may not be able to talk to. For the opera and kids, I don't know why I keep calling it opera kids, workshop, the same thing could be true of schools. We're in contact with this school, this school, this school. We may be doing a middle school, elementary, or really young, right? Maybe you can't pin down that age group quite yet, but saying, here are the things we're going to do and how we're going to tweak them according, depending on what grade level we end up working with. And that's actually very similar to what's happening here. So they have the elementary, middle school visit, musical journey around the world. It's got original and arranged composition for wind quintet, age-appropriate introduction and demonstration on each instrument, classical and music pieces with explanations emphasizing that music for wind quintets comes from all parts of the world. So really lovely, simple, but you get a real picture of what that looks like. Another visit, Zephyronia. Another demonstration. It's a comic musical parable about wind energy and the importance of saving our world with cooperation and understanding. Set on the planet of Zephyronia. So 2 young people presentations. They seem appropriate to young people. And you get a bit of that why in there, that rationale in there. Talking about saving the world from cooperatively. I don't know if there's a more pressing issue right now than getting people excited about the common good in general. And on the other hand, a sort of, very implicit message of diversity in the first one. And then a high school visit, music from around the world, demonstration of the instrument and the role it plays in the wind quintet, and then a bunch of pieces with explanations and the importance of instrumental music in general. A little vague on that one, but notice how it connects to the other ones, and that it's like, oh, this is like a higher, an older kid version of the same idea. We're not just going to demo the instruments. We're going to talk about the roles it plays, right? We're getting sort of an added layer of complexity in the demonstration. The art of the spiritual. Here's another possible event that's going to take place. Here's collegiate. Now very explicit about rationale. Masterclasses. Coachings. Community engagement. This concert, Passion, Bach, and Coltrane. Now it fleshes out that whole thing, talks about the pieces in detail. It talks about, again, the rationale, challenges the performer and listener to be comfortable with the seemingly polar opposites of the musical spectrum presented as equals, right? So in all of these cases, you're getting a picture of competence. You're getting a real picture of what these events look like. You can imagine them, and a sense of the motivation behind it. Connecting with the community, challenging the canon, to put it that way, etc. Key organizational partners: Music on the Square, Greencastle Community School Corporation. This is a bit more of the who. Who are you working with? And then it's all sort of set out here: Music on the Square, Greencastle Community, City of Greencastle. And notice how that mirrors, again, that kind of telescopic, telescope-like thing that was in the rationale, where they're like School of Music, broader school district, full community. That's really echoed here in the partners. There's partners on every level of that. And that kind of formal resonance is good for conveying what you're trying to do. It's true for composition, it's true for writing a paper, and it's true in a grant proposal. This also has you talk about key individuals. This is kind of what you'll be doing in the organizational info section where you're giving bios. So there's a short bio of Imani Wins, a bio of the dean at that time, a sense of their motivation, Harlem String Quartet, bio of them, again, sense of their motivation, and a sense that their motivations are aligned with the motivations of the project, right? This all seems meant to be. And then Dean Adler as well. So performance measurement, same idea of evaluation. And they have, for this project, Ann Weiss, Director of Assessment for Indiana Campus Compact, will consult with school music faculty to help develop a strategic plan for performance reviews, evaluations, and assessments. So a little vague, but that is again balanced by the fact that this is a group that DePaul University has worked with, and we have a specific person whose job it is to do this, right? Additionally, everything will be recorded and attendance will be tracked. Tracking at all public engagement activities will be recorded. Surveys will be distributed at events at Music on the Square. So there is, seems like, a mix of quantitative, as in like how many people are at these concerts, and qualitative, as in we give you a questionnaire to audience members and ask questions about what you liked and gather that data. Qualitative and quantitative assessment. And then finally, items to upload. This is specific to this application, but this might be of interest. I'm not sure for all of you, and I'm not sure if we have time, to be honest, but I can imagine for the podcast, Sam, for example, I know you've done a podcast with Deepa. You could include a little clip in your application or a link to that as a bit of extra. Hey, we're in a position to do this, or in the opera group. The fact, you could include a link to your website, or to you singing some opera, showing your bona fides there. That's a possibility. I don't think it's necessarily necessary, but good. And then the rest of this is nothing. Okay, so that's an example of a real life, big, complicated grant application. One thing I meant to talk about is just the language, which I would describe as quite straightforward. It's not overly formal, but it is focused on clarity, I would say, above all, though not dry. And very clear and straightforward about lofty ideals and goals. I wouldn't call it overly impassioned. I would say this is a barrage of competence is what is projected here. This tells me we know what the fuck we're doing. That's what I get from this. We've got a ton of very specific projects we're going to choose from. We've got a sort of a clear organization of partners, which reflects the organization of what we're proposing. And of course, we have all the budgetary concerns. Cool. All that who, what, where, when, why, it's all on here. And so hopefully, looking at this might give you a couple ideas about how to shape up your own proposal over the next almost a week now. Okay. All right, thanks.